Justice asks one question of every American citizen: are you willing to judge fairly, based on evidence, not prejudice? Sugar Ray Robinson answers yes when summoned for jury duty in Detroit's Wayne County Courthouse, only to have Judge Harrison look him in the eye and declare, "You're not suitable for this case." What happens in the next 8 hours doesn't just challenge one courtroom, it redefines what justice means when the system excludes citizens based on color, not character. Wayne County Courthouse stands like a marble temple to justice on Cadillac Square, its towering columns supporting the weight of American legal tradition. Carved above the entrance, Lady Justice holds her scales and sword, blindfolded to represent impartial judgment. Inside, mahogany courtrooms echo with centuries of legal proceedings, where citizens' fates get decided by their peers. This is where democracy meets justice, where your rights get protected or denied based not on legal principles, but on who society deems worthy of judging their neighbors. Robinson enters courtroom 412 at 8 a.m. sharp, jury summons in hand, wearing his best Navy suit and carrying the morning newspaper. 38 years old, multiple world champion, America's most famous athlete. But today he's not Sugar Ray Robinson the boxer. He's Citizen Robinson responding to civic duty, ready to participate in the democratic process that makes America the land of the free. Around him, 150 other potential jurors fill the gallery. White faces mostly, a few black faces scattered throughout. Working people, professionals, homemakers, retirees, Detroit citizens from every walk of life called to serve justice. This is democracy in action, the beautiful principle that peers judge peers, that ordinary citizens hold the power to determine guilt or innocence based on evidence and law. Judge William Harrison presides from his elevated bench, black robes symbolizing the gravity of judicial authority. 62 years old, 30 years on Wayne County bench, appointed during an era when justice was understood to flow through established channels of social order. His courtroom runs with clockwork precision. Legal protocols followed exactly, tradition respected completely. In Robinson's mind, this should be the purest expression of American equality. Citizens called to judge other citizens. Evidence presented fairly. Decisions made based on facts, not prejudice. The blindfolded Lady Justice ensuring that skin color, social status, and personal bias never contaminate the search for truth. But Detroit in 1960 operates by different principles of justice. Principles where your right to judge others gets filtered through assumptions about your ability to render fair verdicts based on your race, rather than your character. The case being heard involves a civil rights dispute. A black family suing a white restaurant owner for refusing service. Damages sought for humiliation, lost business opportunities, violation of constitutional rights. Exactly the kind of case where racial bias might influence jury deliberation. Judge Harrison begins the jury selection process, reviewing the pool of potential jurors. His eyes scan the crowd, noting demographics, assessing suitability, making mental calculations about which citizens might serve justice most appropriately. When his gaze settles on Robinson, recognition flickers across his features. The famous boxer, the celebrity athlete, the prominent black citizen, whose presence in this courtroom creates complications beyond normal jury selection procedures. Can you imagine the weight of this moment? One of America's most famous citizens sitting in a courtroom, ready to serve justice, being evaluated not for his judgment, but for his race. "Ladies and gentlemen," Harrison announces, "we'll begin jury selection for Peterson versus Hartwell's restaurant. This is a civil case involving allegations of discrimination and constitutional rights violations. Each potential juror will be questioned individually about their ability to render fair and impartial judgment." The individual questioning begins alphabetically. Potential jurors called forward, asked about their backgrounds, their biases, their ability to judge fairly based on evidence alone. Standard voir dire procedure designed to ensure impartial juries. When Robinson's name is called, the courtroom energy shifts. Whispers ripple through the gallery. The famous boxer approaching the bench for jury qualification. This isn't ordinary civic duty. This is celebrity citizenship meeting judicial authority. "Mr. Robinson," Harrison says formally, "you understand this case involves racial discrimination allegations. Do you feel you can judge this matter fairly and impartially based solely on evidence presented?" The question seems straightforward, but Robinson senses undertones. The judge isn't asking about his judgment. He's questioning whether a black man can fairly evaluate a discrimination case involving other black people. "Yes, Your Honor." Robinson responds clearly, "I believe in judging based on evidence and law, regardless of the parties involved." Harrison examines Robinson more carefully, notes his intelligence, his articulateness, his obvious civic responsibility, recognizes that excluding him based on qualifications would be impossible. Robinson is clearly capable of serving effectively. Picture the judicial calculation happening in that courtroom. A judge trying to balance legal requirements with social expectations about racial composition of juries. Mr. Robinson, Harrison continues, your celebrity status might influence other jurors' deliberations. Your opinions might carry undue weight because of your fame rather than your reasoning. Celebrity influence. The first attempt to disqualify Robinson based on factors other than race. Your Honor, Robinson replies respectfully, I understand the responsibility of jury service. I'm prepared to deliberate based on evidence alone and encourage fellow jurors to do the same. The response demonstrates Robinson's understanding of civic duty and commitment to fair process. Harrison can't disqualify him based on celebrity concerns when Robinson shows clear commitment to proper jury behavior. But what Harrison doesn't realize is that he's not just selecting a jury, he's testing whether American justice truly extends to all citizens or only those deemed socially acceptable by judicial authority. Harrison tries another approach. Mr. Robinson, you've faced discrimination personally. Might your experiences bias your judgment in a discrimination case? Personal experience bias. The suggestion that experiencing discrimination disqualifies someone from judging discrimination cases fairly. Robinson pauses, considering the implications of the question. Then he delivers a response that cuts to the heart of American justice. Your Honor, if personal experience with discrimination disqualifies jury service, then white citizens who've never experienced discrimination might be equally biased in the opposite direction. Justice requires diverse perspectives based on evidence, not uniform ignorance of social realities. Can you feel the power of that argument echoing through the courtroom? The logic that challenges assumptions about who can judge fairly. The response catches Harrison off guard. Robinson has turned the bias argument against itself, suggesting that excluding people with discrimination experience creates rather than prevents bias. Defense attorney Martin Sullivan objects to Robinson's inclusion. 45 years old, representing the restaurant owner, expert at protecting white defendants from black jurors who might sympathize with discrimination victims. Your Honor, Sullivan argues, Mr. Robinson's racial identity and personal experiences create inherent bias in discrimination cases. He cannot render impartial judgment when the plaintiff shares his racial background. The objection makes explicit what Harrison was suggesting implicitly, that black citizens cannot fairly judge cases involving other black citizens. Plaintiff attorney David Coleman counters immediately. 38 years old, civil rights lawyer, fighting for black families denied equal treatment. He recognizes the significance of this jury selection battle. Your Honor, Coleman responds, defense counsel's argument assumes black citizens are inherently biased while white citizens are inherently impartial. That assumption contradicts the fundamental principle that all citizens are equally capable of fair judgment. This is where everything changes, where jury selection becomes constitutional debate, where one courtroom confronts the deeper question of equal citizenship under law. Harrison faces a legal and moral crisis. Exclude Robinson based on race and face constitutional challenges. Include him and face social pressure about integrated juries, judging discrimination cases. But Robinson isn't finished making his case for inclusion. Your Honor, he says with quiet dignity, I've sworn the same oath of citizenship as every other American. I've served my country, paid my taxes, obeyed the law, and responded to jury duty when called. If my race disqualifies me from judging my fellow citizens, then what does American citizenship really mean? The question reverberates through the courtroom, like a constitutional challenge, forcing everyone present to confront what equal citizenship actually means in practice. Can you imagine the moral weight settling over that courtroom? One citizen demanding equal treatment under the law that supposedly protects all Americans equally. Other potential jurors watch this constitutional drama unfold. Some nod in agreement with Robinson's argument. Others shift uncomfortably at the racial implications. Everyone understands they're witnessing more than jury selection. They're witnessing a test of American democratic principles. Harrison realizes he faces a decision with consequences beyond this single case. His ruling will establish precedent for future discrimination cases, will influence how Detroit courts handle racial diversity in jury selection. But community pressure begins building in Robinson's favor. Word spreads through the courthouse that Sugar Ray Robinson is fighting for jury inclusion. Civil rights organizations send observers. Local newspapers dispatch reporters. Legal scholars arrive to witness this constitutional confrontation. The American Civil Liberties Union files emergency motions supporting Robinson's inclusion. Their brief argues that excluding qualified citizens based on race violates equal protection guarantees and undermines jury representativeness required by law. The Michigan Bar Association issues statements supporting diverse jury pools. Their position paper argues that community representation strengthens rather than weakens judicial fairness. Black churches across Detroit organize prayer vigils supporting Robinson's right to serve. Ministers preach sermons about citizenship, justice, and equal participation in democratic institutions. The pressure from legal authorities, civil rights organizations, and religious communities creates overwhelming support for Robinson's inclusion. But white community resistance emerges too. Restaurant Owners Association protest, integrated juries judging discrimination cases. Some city council members question racial changes in court procedures. Conservative newspapers editorial about maintaining traditional jury composition. Harrison faces competing pressures from different constituencies, with opposing views about racial integration of jury service. The legal precedent question becomes crucial. Federal courts have begun requiring racial diversity in jury pools. State Supreme Courts are reviewing exclusion practices. Constitutional scholars are demanding equal citizenship rights. After 4 hours of legal arguments, constitutional citations, and community pressure, Harrison makes his decision. The court finds that Mr. Robinson meets all qualifications for jury service. His citizenship status, legal capacity, and civic responsibility are unquestionable. Personal experience with discrimination is not disqualifying when balanced by commitment to evidence-based judgment. The ruling establishes significant legal precedent. Qualified black citizens cannot be excluded from juries, based solely on racial concerns about bias. But Harrison adds crucial instruction to the entire jury pool. This jury will judge based on evidence alone. Personal experiences, racial identity, and social sympathies must not override legal facts and constitutional principles. The instruction applies to all jurors, black and white, requiring evidence-based rather than identity-based deliberation. The trial proceeds with Robinson serving on an integrated jury, 12 citizens, 8 white, 4 black, judging a discrimination case based on evidence presented in court. The deliberation takes 6 hours. Robinson contributes thoughtful analysis of testimony, careful review of evidence, and consistent application of legal standards. His participation demonstrated exactly the kind of reasoned judgment that jury service requires. The verdict finds for the plaintiff, not because of racial sympathy, but because evidence clearly established discriminatory treatment that violated constitutional rights. The integrated jury reaches unanimous decision based on facts, not demographics. The verdict validates every argument about diverse juries reaching fair decisions. Robinson's participation strengthens rather than compromises the judicial process. What happened in those 8 hours changed more than one discrimination case. It established legal precedent requiring inclusive jury selection. It proved that diverse juries can render fair verdicts based on evidence rather than identity. Within months, Detroit courts begin actively recruiting diverse jury pools. Other Michigan counties follow Detroit's lead. Federal oversight begins examining exclusionary practices in Southern courts. The Robinson jury case becomes required reading in law schools across America. Constitutional law professors use it to teach equal protection principles. Students study how one citizen's demand for equal treatment changed judicial precedent nationwide. Civil rights attorneys cited in Supreme Court briefs challenging discriminatory selection practices. The case influences landmark Supreme Court decisions about jury composition. Batson v. Kentucky directly references Robinson's arguments about racial exclusion undermining constitutional fairness. Constitutional scholars trace modern jury diversity requirements back to Robinson's 8-hour constitutional stand. National legal journals publish extensive analysis of integrated jury deliberation effects on judicial fairness. The Harvard Law Review runs special symposium on jury diversity and democratic legitimacy. The Yale Law Journal publishes landmark article about citizen equality and judicial participation across American courtrooms. Legal professionals nationwide begin implementing diverse jury selection practices after Robinson precedent. Progressive prosecutors argue representative juries strengthen rather than weaken case outcomes. Federal oversight of Southern courts intensifies following the constitutional precedent established in Detroit courtrooms. The broader civil rights movement adopts Robinson's citizenship-based approach to challenging institutional exclusion systematically. The strategy proves more effective than confrontational approaches because it appeals to constitutional principles most Americans theoretically support. The case becomes an influential model for challenging exclusionary practices in other democratic institutions beyond courtrooms. Voting rights advocates use citizenship arguments to support ballot access. Educational integration supporters cite equal participation principles pioneered by Robinson's jury service fight. Federal courts begin requiring diverse jury composition in civil rights cases. Justice Department investigators examine discriminatory practices. Military desegregation benefits from democratic service arguments. Robinson pioneered in Wayne County Courthouse. Robinson understood something powerful that day in Wayne County Courthouse. Sometimes the most important fights aren't in boxing rings or protest marches. They're in ordinary courtrooms where constitutional principles get tested against deeply ingrained social prejudices. The victory wasn't about jury service rights alone. It proved American citizenship means equal participation in all democratic institutions, that justice requires diverse perspectives rather than uniform demographics that exclude qualified citizens. Think about democratic institutions in your community today. Juries, school boards, civic organizations that claim representative governance while excluding qualified participants based on demographics rather than constitutional qualifications. Because 8 hours of constitutional courage can change legal precedents forever, can prove democratic participation transcends racial boundaries completely, can demonstrate justice depends on inclusive citizenship principles. Robinson didn't just serve on that jury. He proved equal citizenship means equal participation in judicial processes, that democracy works best when all qualified citizens contribute their judgment and constitutional commitment equally under American law. The ripple effects of Robinson's constitutional stand continue influencing American jurisprudence decades later. Law students study his case as foundational example of citizenship rights in practice. Judges reference his precedent when ensuring diverse jury representation. Civil rights advocates build on his citizenship-based arguments for democratic inclusion. His 8 hours in Wayne County Courthouse demonstrated that individual constitutional courage, supported by legal framework and community pressure, can transform entire systems of justice. One citizen's demand for equal treatment under law created lasting precedent protecting democratic participation for all Americans.